conservative, constitutional. It's the Andrew Cooperrider Show, keeping you informed on what's going on right here in Kentucky.
And welcome everybody to an amazing week right here on the Andrew Cooperrider Show. Of course, I'm your host, Andrew Cooperrider. We're starting off this week with quite an amazing show, but we've got a lot of things we need to cover this week as well. I've got tons of topics that we need to cover this week. So what I want to encourage you to do is make sure you're always tuning into the show. If you're listening on the radio, it's at 9 a.m. Monday through Friday on WZXI. And then it's available in the audio format Monday through Friday at 1 p.m. on all major podcasting platforms. You can head on over to theandrewshow.com. That's theandrewshow.com. If you want to figure out which one to follow on, whatever your favorite one is, you can follow there. All the links are there. Or you can watch today's episode in video format, but this is the only episode that's available in the video format for those of you tuning in. But today we're going to cover a hearing on a bill by Lindsey Tishner over in the Senate, and it was quite an interesting hearing, and the bill does a few different things that we'll be digging in to that. We'll also be covering a viral dust-up that Senator Berg has had recently with some of her comments and going over what she's had to say about them and what the comments are. But before we dig into that, I'll be going over something that happened to me yesterday, Sunday. I was driving through the part of Lexington that is normally the more Hispanic area of Lexington. And I happened to see this bus here. And this bus had just pulled into a random parking lot. Well, not random, but pulled into a parking lot, a sizable one, and just started unloading people. Now, it's possible that the people it was unloading that were mainly, of course, Hispanic were just individuals that were out on a trip and everything else. And I'm not trying to necessarily jump to conclusions here, but I did see a huge unloading of people, and I bothered to research about the bus line, the tornado bus line that was dropping them off. And they have a long and storied past, several headlines where they have been involved, of course, in transporting illegal immigrants all across the country, transporting them all over the place. Many news stories citing this bus line as a go-to bus line for dropping off illegal transportation. So I can't say for a fact that what I saw was a busload of illegal immigrants being dropped off right here into Kentucky. And I don't want to necessarily say jump to those conclusions, but at the same time, there's a lot of evidence there to kind of support it. And I bring this up because we'd always heard that, of course, they're dumping off these busloads of illegal immigrants all over the country and even here into Kentucky. I remember recently I was hearing about some busloads being dropped off into Nicholasville. But here it appeared to be a busload being dropped off into Lexington. Of course, continuing to follow up on that would be incredibly important, I would say so. But obviously, we need to be, I wouldn't even say on the lookout in the way of saying that every single bus drop-off of mainly Latino people probably isn't illegal immigration, but be on the lookout for that and drawing attention to your local officials when that's going on. Because what we've seen in all these cities is that when this mass amount of illegal immigration comes into an area, it strains a lot of the city's resources, supplies, ability to provide for their own constituents. So it's definitely something to be on the lookout for. Like I said, I'm not going to claim that this was what it was, but it certainly appeared to be an illegal drop-off of immigrants here in Kentucky. And it's unfortunate that that's going on here in Kentucky. Obviously, legal immigration, more than welcome to come. Lexington's actually, I believe, still one of the biggest per capita places for Congolesans actually to migrate to, legal migration, which is all fine and dandy. But what we can't have is this illegal immigration that is putting this huge strain on our public resources. And also, too, we've got to watch out for, potentially additional crime and other things. We've been seeing a lot of news stories around the nation where we've seen this illegal immigration spike leading to quite a lot of crime as well. So it's certainly something to be on the lookout for, just something I wanted to mention. Now, there was an amendment on a bill last week that I just wanted to also go over. So last week we went over this House bill that was making it illegal for credit card companies to create a special transaction code for gun shops in order to track exactly who is buying guns at gun stores. And we went over that committee hearing there, and the bill passed committee, the bill passed the House. What's interesting is there was a Democrat, I believe Sarah Stalker, I could be mistaken, who filed an amendment on the bill that would make gun safes and gun storage locks and basically, gun locking racks, those types of items used to secure your firearms, a tax-free purchase. And for the first time ever, I found myself supporting a piece of legislation that was being put forward by a Democrat on guns. If this is what they've meant all along about common sense gun reform, I don't think that's quite what they've meant, but all along about common sense gun reform is tax-free safes. Sign me up. I think you might find yourself oddly supported. So I want to encourage that Democrat. Please, you felt it was important enough to run an amendment. Please run a bill on this. I believe the House would pass it in a second. They'd love to pass it to show that they passed something bipartisan that I think all of us would agree with, that, sales tax free safes, gun safes would be awesome. They're not cheap. A gun safe can easily run you $3,000, $4,000, $5,000. You could save on that sales tax there. That's a pretty massive amount. I mean, on $5,000, what sales tax is $300 or so, right? That's right. Yeah, $300. So, that's a pretty hefty savings being brought to you by the Democrats here in Kentucky. And so if they're turning over a new leaf and saying, you know what, we've been mistaken all along about trying to remove guns from people. Instead, we need to incentivize them for safe storage, not through the use of law and not in a way that doesn't make any sense, but by making things like gun safes and gun locks able to be tax-free, then sign me up. Now, we do have a piece of legislation on the negative side of guns, this one brought by a Republican, Whitney Westerfield, on CAR. I've gone over CAR a few times here in this show, so if you want, you can go back and listen to those where I talk about CAR. It stands for Crisis Aversion Rights Retention Act. It's a red flag law proposed by Whitney. He wants to get it passed. Now, this bill was proposed in the Senate. The Senate has a rule. Every bill must be sent to a committee. The House does not have that same rule. So they had to send this bill to a committee, and they could have chose to send it to the Judiciary Committee, which is chaired by Whitney Westfield, the bill's sponsor, which would have ensured that the bill got a hearing. But instead, the bill was sent over to the Veterans and Military and Public Protection Standing Committee, which is not chaired by Whitney Westerfield. I think that was a move by Senate leadership to kill the bill. They don't want it coming up this time around. So it could be the case they're trying to kill the bill, but that red flag gun law that we know we all need to be against. Like I said, I've gone over deeply the reasons why on prior shows. So I encourage you, if you have questions about it, you can email me, info@theandrewshow.com, and I'll direct you towards those episodes. But the point is that they're moving into this committee potentially to kill it, that Crisis Aversion Rights Retention Act, that red flag law. So we'll be keeping our eyes on that as well. Now, coming up after this, we'll be digging into an important piece of legislation that had a committee hearing in the Senate by Lindsay Tishner. We'll be covering that after this short break. You're listening to the Andrew Cooperrider Show, your source for Kentucky politics. 859 Print has local service and low prices. I personally have done tons of business with them, and I can tell you, whether it is getting things printed off, sending direct mail, making business cards, buying TV ad time, digital marketing, they can do it all. And as a special for listeners of this show, they're offering 10% off any and all print services using code RIDER2024. That is code RIDER 2024 for 10% off. Check out 859 Print. You'll be glad you did. And you are back with the Andrew Cooperrider Show, your source for Kentucky politics. So Senator Lindsay Tishner put forward Senate Bill 147, which had a committee hearing this past week. That was quite an interesting discussion I wanted to go over. So the point of this bill is to stop sexually explicit performances from occurring on public property or near places like schools, daycares, anywhere where you could expect to see children. And of course, this is taking a look at the big problem when it comes to these drag shows. We've seen a lot of very unfortunate occurrences where we've seen very sexually explicit performances by drag performers, and children have been there and been involved. Now, of course, people would sit there and say, well, some people gaslight, and they would say that, well, drag shows aren't necessarily sexual in nature, Andrew. What are you talking about? They're not necessarily sexual. Well, Senator Berg, who has become quite a frequent flyer of problems, decided to also try to gaslight on this same issue. And so we have Senator Berg with this comment here.
The type of drag shows that I'm used to that do not have nudity, do not have explicit sexual performances.
Now, of course, that's the kind of gaslighting we've come to expect from the left on this issue. They claim that this has nothing, absolutely nothing to do, this drag queen fetish the left has, where they love sending their kids to it. They love getting their kids involved at it. It's become a blight on society, and they love to pretend that this isn't sexual at all in nature. In fact, not necessarily everything is meant to be sexually enticing to minors. Maybe it's just meant to be sexually enticing to adults, they say. Maybe it's okay for minors and children to be around naked people. And I don't mean they just say that. I mean, that is literally what Lindsay Berg, I'm sorry, not Lindsay Berg, Karen Berg, sorry. That's exactly what she had to say just a few moments later when she was saying that, well, what her issues were with the bill.
Say that, we have sexually explicit theater that it's not X-rated, where we have, people in various stages of undress for a purpose other than to be sexually enticing to a minor. And it is not necessarily inappropriate for a minor to be in that situation.
What? So what she just said was that it's okay for minors to be around people who are naked in performances. There are times where that is okay. I never thought that the Democrats would just give up so much of the quote-unquote high road, so much of the easy things to say, that this would be controversial, that this would be taking a stand against the left to say something like this. No minor should ever be at a show where somebody is naked. No minor should ever be watching something where somebody is getting naked, especially as a theatrical performance. If you want to say there's some quote-unquote nudity when they're, 16 years old or whatever age they are, where they're learning about sex ed, that they show some cartoon drawings in order to teach anatomy and things like that, that's one thing. But what she's talking about is actual performances where people are taking off their clothes. And she says, well, it's not meant to be sexually enticing to children, maybe. So let me get this straight. What Berg is saying there, what Senator Berg is saying, if I follow her logic, is that if, a stripper is doing a sex tease, a strip tease for an adult, okay? If an adult performer is doing a tease of some sort involving taking their clothes off, but it's meant for the, man or woman or whoever sitting in front of her, and not meant for the child that's sitting off to the right-hand side who's also watching, then that's okay? That isn't okay. What are we talking about here? We've gotten to a point where we have people in elected position actually trying to justify. This is how far off the crazy rails we've gotten. This is how far down the rabbit hole we've climbed. You want to talk about slippery slope? We're at the bottom of the slope, and it appears like it just keeps going, because never in my entire life did I think I would have to be fighting against an argument saying it's okay for minors to be around people who are naked. Around naked people. Adults who are naked. I never thought I'd have to be arguing on that. But apparently, this is where the world has gotten to at this point, and it's absolutely ridiculous. Now, obviously, Karen had some other comments she made in a different hearing, but, we'll cover that probably here at the end. So keep in mind, though, Karen Berg. But this really points to a lot of these individuals where they have this odd doublespeak, where they say that being in drag has nothing to do with sex. You are making it sexual, has nothing to do with sex. And it's worth noting, though, in this bill, and Senator Lindsey Tishner said this in the hearing, that this specific bill, this Senate Bill, Senate Bill 147, I do believe. So yeah, Senate Bill 147, that in the hearing, she did specifically say that this bill is not aiming at people who are doing they're exaggeratedly dressed, maybe in drag performance or a drag performer, but they're not doing a sexually explicit dance such as gyrating their hips or things like that, or exposing themselves, that this one an outlaw. So this actually takes no aim at dealing with things like Drag Queen Story Hour at the library, those crazy things we have going on. It doesn't do anything with that. But despite the fact that this is specifically aimed at performances, now I would sit there and say all drag performances are sexual. It's a sexual fetish. That's what it is. That's what it is. And if people want to do that in the privacy of their own bedroom or in a 21 or 18 and up club, then that's their choice to do it. But to have that around children is absolutely ridiculous. And it's, like I said, this is ridiculous. We even have to have this conversation. And I have no idea, even those on the far left, that think these drag performances are perfectly okay, I have no idea why they would ever be opposed to a bill like this. Because it still allows you to walk around in your drag and everything else. It doesn't allow you to do a sexual performance in front of children drag is already sexual, but to move in a more sexually provocative way or remove clothing, do a striptease. It also outlaws burlesque, too, around kids. So, either way. But despite that, people did come out against it, and they did testify. And at the beginning of their testifying, we had this unfortunate moment from this a chair of this committee, Senator Girdler. Let's take a watch here.
Don't go first. All right, whatever. All right, introduce yourself, and I'll tell you what, I'm going to let Polly go first because I've missed her. Go ahead.
Good morning. As some of you may remember, my name is Polly Tix. I was here last legislative session, and I'm excited to be back.
In case you missed it, what Girdler said while he was letting the people opposed speak said, we'll let Polly, who's a drag queen that goes by the title Polly Tix, we'll let her go first. Senator, that's a dude. And with all due respect to the senator, please, for the love of everything, stop buying in to this nonsense. This is how they keep winning. They are attacking your very nature of trying to be kind and nice. And I get it. Senator Girdler panicked in the moment. He didn't know what to say, her, him, whatever. It's a person dressed like a woman, so he said her. But you can't honor that. And he had actually said it earlier, her. And I could tell he had that moment of trying to figure out which pronoun to use. Because, obviously you've got a dude dressed in drag in front of you. And he went with her, and then he continued to use her again. That is clearly a guy. For those of you listening to the audio-only version, you heard it. That's a dude. Quite clearly. Stop buying in to their crazy nonsense. That's a guy. That's not a woman. That's not somebody who can give birth. That's not somebody who provides the miracle of growing a child in their womb for 9 months and giving birth. That is a dude who should be addressed as such. So what did the dude have to say. Let's take a listen to what this guy had to say about why this is a no good, very bad bill.
Although you define sexually explicit content and in a last-minute sub provided inadequate definitions of sexually explicit drag performances, it is still unclear if individuals who have any disapproval of drag could bring civil cause of action against those performers. I have a great deal of uncertainty that these restraints would be applied equally. You mentioned it is not always the clothing, but how it is worn and the behaviors behind it. I am unsure if these restrictions would be applicable to places such as Hooters Bar and Grill that could arguably be seen as sexually implicit, and although their outfits may meet the definitions of being okay, their behaviors may be interpreted as provoking sexual enticement.
Well, there it is, the old what about Hooters argument, to which I say if you want to outlaw kids going to Hooters, let's go for it. Like, that's not a good argument. If there was a ruling to say kids can't go to Hooters, would that really be the worst thing? Would you all really throw a fit about that? Would anybody really lose their mind about that? But they say that like they think, oh, here we got you, right? You only have a problem with exposing yourself to minors because it's gay people. If they were straight, you'd have no problem with some girl exposing herself to a little boy or some adult man exposing himself to a little girl or something like they get that in their mind. Like we're somehow okay with this if people aren't dressing as the opposite sex while doing it, which is just false. We're against it at all times. But this wasn't the only arguments we had about it. No. We had many more arguments against this very bill that makes a whole lot of sense. We'll be going over what those arguments were after this short break. You're listening to the Andrew Cooperrider Show. I'm your host, Andrew Cooperrider. We'll see you back here in a few short minutes. Listen up, my fellow business owners. You need to get your cybersecurity and IT support under control. Reach out to the folks at Amston today. Call 859-300-0087 or visit amston.com. It is no secret that cyber attacks have become a constant threat, and you need to make sure that your organization is protected. Amston has over 30 years of experience working with businesses and governments alike. Call 859-300-0087 or visit AmstonAMPSTUN.com today. And you are back with the Andrew Cooperrider Show. Before the break, we were going over Senate Bill 147 hearing. The bill's very straightforward, very needed, but the bill would outlaw sexual performances such as drag shows from taking place on public property or near places like elementary schools, playgrounds, and as such. And so we've heard some pretty crazy arguments against the bill so far. We heard one argument from Senator Berg, who had her, once again, hot trash take that, sometimes it's okay for kids to be around naked people in a performance. That's fine. That's fine to do. And then we had a drag queen, a guy that drags under the name Politics, that Senator Girdler, the chair, mistakenly used the her pronoun with, and I say mistaken, I'm sure that's what Politic would like you to use, but we don't buy into that garbage. No, we do not. And so now we've got to hear some more arguments why these people think a bill specifically stating, now remember, this bill doesn't outlaw things like drag queen story hour, but why a bill that's specifically aimed at not even eliminating people in drag or drag performances, but specifically drag performances that involve more sexualized. Like I said, drag to begin with is a fetish. That's what it is. There's nothing artistic about it. It's a fetish. Same as burlesque. Burlesque is a fetish. They perform in fetish gear. Drag queens perform in fetish gear. And if you're into that, good for you. Do that in your bedroom. Do that in your private clubs. You don't do that in front of children. But regardless, this bill doesn't even do that. All it says is, hey, you can't basically simulate sexual acts in front of children, and you can't get naked in front of kids. Pretty straightforward, pretty easy. But they're against this bill because, of course, they're trash humans who are literally amongst the worst people in society. They're like gutter humans that have become so morally corrupted, they've lost everything. And so following up on this trashness, we have this guy make a comment that apparently performs under the name of mayonnaise, however you say it, doesn't matter. Let's listen to what he has to say.
Good morning. I'm Andrew Schaffline from Jefferson County. I'm also a drag performer named May O'Nays. I'm the aforementioned drag performer that the senator met with a couple weeks ago. Polly hit the political stuff real good, so I'm going to speak to a different component. I'm not also just a drag queen. I am a parent. I have 3-year-old twins. And this bill has been written allegedly to protect children. Of all the threats to children, of which there are many, drag, I don't believe, is one of them. As a parent, it's our job to decide what art and what culture is appropriate for our children to see. For instance, I don't know that I would take my kids to a WWE wrestling match. It's quite violent, or a gun show, or maybe a Hooters. But these are all places that children are allowed to go. And isn't it great? We live in a country where we can have these vast experiences and all make different decisions for our families.
So he says he's got kids, which I feel bad for. But anyways, he says, I have kids and I want to take them these places, but I should be free to do so. Why is this a difference? Well, there's a big difference here. And it deals with the fact that this, once again, is a sexual performance with fetishness, sex, nudity. You see, while there are guidelines around how kids can be exposed to guns as well, such as like, can you shoot, who you can shoot with, under what parental supervision, kids can't purchase guns, so on and so forth. It's not exactly illegal for kids to be around guns. However, it is illegal for kids to be near some random adult's exposed body, or at least it should be. I think we can agree on that. So unless your argument here is that kids should be allowed near and around and to be touching, because remember, these kids are sometimes shoving dollar bills into these drag performers' clothes, naked people. So if they're allowed, if your idea is they're allowed to be near, around, and touching naked people performing, and that's not abuse, then we're running into problems here. If you're saying that your kids should be around people performing in fetish gear that are getting their rocks off on it, and you're saying that, no, that's not abuse, we should allow that regardless, that's where we are. And that's the real argument here. So yeah, that's the reason. We're saying no, kids shouldn't be allowed around that. Currently in law, they're kind of sort of protected from some of that, but we're clearing that up because you all insist on bringing your kids around things that a lot of normal people, such as myself, could make a pretty straightforward argument that that is sexual abuse. And then let's also not pretend that this mayonnaise guy, if he could outlaw kids going to gun shows or going into gun stores, he would in a heartbeat. Let's not pretend like this far leftist wouldn't in an absolute second, be perfectly fine with outlawing kids from going to anywhere with guns. So, once again, he's bringing up points that under his own logic, he would be fine with people doing. So to say that, everybody should just be free to raise their kids, here's examples of ways people are free to raise their kids. You wouldn't even agree with all those examples. You think they should be outlawed from going to gun shows, most likely. Of course, though, that's what these people want. That's their logic. They don't have a standard. Well, they do. It's called a double standard. And we know that this is more than just an artistic expression. We know that this is wrong for kids to go around. How do we know? Well, first, look at what the bill does. Remember, it separates out a sexual drag from people just being in drag. As if something like that exists, the bill does do that. But yet, they're still against this. Let's hear a comment from a business owner on why they've got a big, giant, huge, big old problem with this piece of legislation.
These festivals are not only cultural celebrations, but also significant economic drivers for local communities, attracting tourists and supporting various local businesses, including those owned by LGBTQ individuals. The loss of revenue for area businesses due to canceled or scaled down Pride festivals could be substantial. Restaurants, hotels, shops, and other service providers benefit from the influx of visitors attending these events. Additionally, LGBTQ entrepreneurs who rely on Pride festivals as platforms to showcase their services or artistic expressions could face financial setbacks and decreased visibility within the community. This bill raises significant concerns regarding its fairness, its legal implications, and its effectiveness. Its ambiguous definitions are directly targeting LGBTQ individuals and their expressions when similar laws are already being enforced. This not only marginalizes and stigmatizes these individuals, but also infringes upon their rights and free expression of assembly protected under the First Amendment. I don't want sexually explicit shows in front of kids, but here we are.
Yeah, you do.
Professionals who know what this language is and how to debate it, and here we are turning it over to individuals and opening it up for civil lawsuits, opening it up for tying up the courts, and however police officers in different communities try to enforce this and try to interpret this law. And I think that that is dangerous. This law does nothing. It just hurts us. Thank you.
So first, he starts with the economic argument. So let me get this straight. A bill saying you can't be naked around minors and you can't perform sexually around minors is going to hurt gay businesses and pride festivals. And you want to tell us these things aren't a blight on society? That exposing kids to naked people is an integral part of what they're doing, and if we take that away, they will go out of business? No wonder why you're being attacked so much. No wonder why you feel like people hate you. You literally feel like you need to expose nudity to children, and you're worried about how you're going to make money off of it. No wonder why you feel attacked, because what you're doing is wrong. On top of that, it clearly is sexual, because listen to what he said. He said, oh, you're targeting people based upon their sexuality. Well, if this is entirely just about artistic expression, then why is their sexuality coming into play? Why is it? You see, it's not the right. It's not people like me who've tied drag shows to being sexual performances. It's the left. They have tied it. Because every time you go after them, they tell you you're attacking people based upon their sexual identity. LGB literally deals with who you go to bed with. And you want to tell me that this isn't sexual performances? If it's all about artistic expression and the sexual side has nothing to do with it, then why are you even bringing them up? How's this an attack on people who are going to bed with lesbian, gay, and bisexual people who go to bed with different people? How's that attack on that? Well, Senator Meredith asked an important question in this hearing. We'll be going over that after this short break. You're listening to the Andrew Cooperrider Show, your source for Kentucky politics.
Lexington Overstock Warehouse is Central Kentucky's best source for stylish new home furnishings. Don't pay retail. With our low overhead operating structure and big name brands, we offer the absolute best values on new furniture for every room. Shop online anytime at LexingtonOverstockWarehouse.com or visit our weekends only showroom located at 156 West Tiverton Way. Right now, for listeners of this show, we're offering a special discount for our online customers. Use coupon code FREEDOM for an additional 10% off your online order today. Lexington Overstock Warehouse, low overhead equals really low prices.
And you're back with the Andrew Cooperrider Show, your source for Kentucky politics. Before the break, we were talking about Senate Bill 147 had a hearing in committee. And while the bill itself is dealing with, outlawing basically sexually explicit drag shows and nudity to be on public property or near, things like schools, playgrounds, those kinds of things taking place basically where children can see it. And it doesn't do anything about Drag Queen Story Hour. Senator Meredith did ask, because there was some drag queens obviously testifying on this piece of legislation. So Senator Meredith did ask why they insist on reading to kids. Let's take a listen to what they had to say here.
And I guess I'd like to know, what do you think is possibly could be considered educational or entertainment value to a 4-year-old in that kind of environment? What are we trying to accomplish?
I'd like to respond to that by pointing out in previous questioning of Senator Tishner, she mentioned that performances at libraries was not included. So the question I'm a little confused about in that response is, if the things that kind of motivated this was drag queens reading to children, that concern isn't being addressed in this bill. The other thing that I would like to point out in terms of the question of what educational or entertainment value would be offered to children is just the freedom of expression and the reminder that regardless of who they love, how they dress, or how they want to present in the world, they are protected, they are loved, and they are seen. By making this kind of streamline conversation of how kids are supposed to act or how they're supposed to dress without this kind of opportunity to explore different things in safe and regulated ways, we're kind of stunting what children are allowed to explore and develop. And in doing these drag queen story hours, the books that are read represent different types of families, and the queens or kings or performers themselves represent different types of Americans that belong and are allowed to exist in this country.
Well, there you have it. That's why they have to read to kids, they say, because these kids need to make sure they feel seen and accepted and loved and blah, 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 blah. These kids are like 5 and 6 years old. These kids aren't gay any more than they're straight. They're not really anything. They're kids. They're not sexual beings. They're children. Supposed to be treated as such. That's why these kinds of things around kids are so abhorrent and disgusting. Because kids are kids. Of course. But, as you heard, they said, well, we want to make sure these kids feel seen and heard and they're able to explore other lifestyles. It has nothing to do with the kids. I'll answer Senator Emeritus' questions a little more directly. It has to do with the fact that these drag queens, that these weirdos, that these sick individuals, and I know they're sick because they want to dress and drag and read to kids. You have to be a uniquely sick in the head person to do that. And I will die on that hill. It's about them. You see, the kids don't feel less loved or unaccepted or unable to explore or blah, 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 or unseen. They don't feel any of that. Who feels that is you, the drag person, the trans person, the LGBTQ person. You feel that way because you don't feel accepted. And you don't feel accepted because what you're doing isn't natural. It goes against our human nature. We know that. We can go into the long list of reasons why and that debate, but we don't have time for that. So I'll say this. They're doing it to kids because they want the kids to accept them because, one, they feel like they're not accepted anywhere else. And then, two, they want to make sure that there's more of them out there. They want to make sure these kids coming up, that there's more people who are transgender and gay and bisexual. There has to be more. They want to be the normal. Because as abnormal as they are, they have a huge desire, as all humans do, to feel like they're normal or fitting in, and they don't. And so they have to create a situation where we've got to change how people think. And I can't change how a person who grew up in a normal household amongst normal society for the last decades thinks, but we can get to the kids and change how they think. And that's exactly what their goal is. Now, speaking of pedophiles, recently Senator Berg came under attack because there was a hearing on a bill that was looking at outlawing, in a past committee, that is outlawing child dolls for pedophiles to simulate interactions on. And while my opinion on what we should do with them varies from death penalties to lifetime in jail in the general population, because even those hardened criminals know messing around with kids is wrong. Well, Karen Berg, though, doesn't seem to understand that. Let's listen to what she had to say in that committee.
I was completely unfamiliar with child sex dolls, so I had, of course, to Google it last night. I was a little scared to put it in my search engine, but I did. And apparently there is research on the subject. Not much, but there are what they call MAPs, minor attracted persons. And the limited amount of research that's done on these dolls, guys, suggests that they actually, for people who are attracted to minors, that these dolls actually decrease their proclivity to go out and attack children. That it actually gives them a release that makes them less likely to go outside of their home. And what was interesting is the research did not support the same conclusions for people who were adult attracted using dolls. That did not diminish their proclivity to engage other people, but for those with the, so I'm just a little concerned that, and like I say, the research is not very good. It is not comprehensive, but the research that is out there is conclusive.
Now that clip there has gone viral. Robbie Starbuck, well known, he retweeted it out. A bunch of people have been talking about it. And so that led to Karen Berg issuing a statement clarifying her position as if it needs clarifying. And that led, of course, to what I guess we would call an apology, I guess. I mean, keep in mind that her entire statement there has already been debunked. And why she's being attacked is because, of course, she was peddling propaganda for pedophiles, the most disgusting amongst us, in order to say, well, we don't want you to feel marginalized or unaccepted. We want you to feel like you belong too, even if what you're doing's wrong. That's what they think. So we have Karen Berg with this, I guess you'd call it apology. And this is what she said on the floor on Friday.
Guys, I think it's hilarious. I mean, I think what they put out there is so funny. If we can't talk about things openly as adults, then I don't think we can make good decisions. I just want to make sure people understand I did vote in favor of the bill, unlike several of my colleagues. For the record, for those of you who don't understand what's going on, a meme or a social something was put out last night. It's cute, but I am getting amazingly anti-Semitic emails as a result. And I just want people to understand I voted in favor of this bill. So thank you.
Anti-Semitic emails, she said. She's been getting some anti-Semitic emails. That's just awful. Just awful. I highly doubt a whole lot of them have been super anti-Semitic in that way. But I'm sure that she has gotten some pretty threatening and awful emails because, generally speaking, people don't like individuals that want to make pedophilia somehow socially accepted. Call us crazy. Not me. I didn't send her any violent or threatening emails, but call people crazy. And if you want, but I certainly understand why people might be upset at the kinds of people that want to threaten and lead to violent attacks on children or make excuses for those who wish to do so. And not make sure everybody understands that they're trash, they're debris, they need no quarter here. They need no acceptance. The minute somebody comes out and says, oh, I'm a minor attracted person, or whatever she said, they need to be excommunicated from society, not given a doll. And that should be obvious. That's why you're getting called out. Well, y'all, that's what we have time for today on the Andrew Cooperrider Show. I thank y'all so much for joining me. We'll be back here tomorrow in the audio format and on WZXI. Till then, we'll be seeing you.